In a stunning twist that has Washington fuming, Prime Minister Mark Carney has just shaken the global stage. After years of icy silence between Ottawa and Beijing, Carney sat down face-to-face with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and what came out of that 39-minute meeting has left Donald Trump absolutely furious. According to insiders, the meeting, hosted by China during the APEC summit in Gyeongju, South Korea, was far more than just polite diplomacy. Behind the closed doors, away from cameras and microphones, the two leaders discussed what's now being described as a new economic realignment. A quiet partnership that could redraw North America's balance of power. Carney called the moment a turning point for Canada's relationship with China, and that single phrase sent shockwaves across Washington. For the first time in 8 years, a Canadian Prime Minister met with Xi Jinping. The tone was warm, cooperative, and very deliberate. Carney even accepted Xi's invitation for a state visit to Beijing, something no Canadian leader has dared to do since the Huawei controversy blew open the diplomatic rift back in 2018. According to a readout from the Prime Minister's office, both sides agreed to resolve trade irritants, from canola to electric vehicles, and to explore a framework for deeper cooperation on energy, agriculture, manufacturing, and international finance. But what the official readout didn't say is what's fueling all the speculation today. Multiple diplomatic sources, speaking on background, claim that Carney and Xi discussed a potential financial coordination mechanism, something that could quietly reduce Canada's reliance on U.S. trade flows and the American dollar. One senior source described it as a polite but clear signal that Ottawa is ready to diversify away from Washington. That, analysts say, is exactly what Trump didn't want to hear. Within hours of the meeting, Trump reportedly called a closed-door briefing at the White House, demanding a full intelligence assessment of what he called Carney's back-channel with China. One senior Trump aide, quoted anonymously, said the president was furious that Canada might be undermining U.S. leverage on Beijing. In a fiery social media post that was later deleted, Trump allegedly wrote, "Mark Carney should remember who protects Canada's economy. If he wants China, he can pay China's prices." White House officials haven't confirmed the post, but screenshots have already gone viral across multiple platforms. And that's not all. According to one insider from Ottawa's diplomatic corps, she offered Carney a long-term economic cooperation deal worth billions in infrastructure and green energy investment, something that could align Canada's economic future closer to China's Belt and Road model. If that's true, it would mark the biggest shift in Canadian foreign policy in decades. During their meeting, she congratulated Carney on his leadership and noted that 2025 marks the 55th anniversary of diplomatic ties between China and Canada. He said relations were recovering and now had positive development momentum. Carney responded with what many are calling a strategic message to both Beijing and Washington. "Distance is not the way to solve problems," Carney said. "Pragmatic and constructive engagement is." For analysts, those words sounded less like polite diplomacy, and more like a quiet rebuke of Trump's tariff-heavy approach. Carney's statement that "this is a turning point" was carefully chosen. Behind the scenes, Canadian officials have been pushing for what they call a balanced global posture, one where Canada can maintain strong ties with both the US and China, without being forced to pick a side. But to Trump's inner circle, that sounds dangerously close to betrayal. According to sources in Washington, Trump's economic advisors are now exploring retaliatory options, including revisiting tariffs on Canadian goods if Ottawa signs any new trade agreements with Beijing. Some even suggest the U.S. may temporarily pause joint energy cooperation projects, citing national security considerations. It's a classic Trump move: turn up the pressure, threaten economic pain, and force allies back into line. But Carney seems unfazed. In his post-meeting remarks, he said this turning point could create opportunities for Canadian families, businesses, and workers, while also creating a path to address current issues. To many Canadians, that sounds like a leader ready to pivot away from America's shadow. Let's not forget the bitter history between the two nations. Back in 2018, Canada arrested Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou at the request of the United States. In retaliation, China detained 2 Canadians, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, for over 1,000 days. The incident froze diplomatic relations and turned public opinion against Beijing. For years, Canadian leaders avoided direct contact with top Chinese officials. That ice has finally started to melt, and it's Carney who's breaking it. This is not Carney's first encounter with Xi. Their previous meeting took place in 2016, when Carney was Governor of the Bank of England and Chair of the Financial Stability Board. Back then, they discussed international finance and monetary stability. Today, as Prime Minister, Carney brings far more power, and far more risk, to that table. And yet, what's most striking is what wasn't mentioned at all: human rights, foreign interference, and security concerns. Those were topics that once dominated Canada-China relations. Now, they've vanished from the official script. That silence has drawn criticism from opposition parties and U.S. lawmakers alike. Republican senators are reportedly calling for an investigation into what one of them described as a dangerous realignment of North American loyalties. Meanwhile, Chinese state media has already hailed the meeting as a success, calling Carney's visit a fresh wind of pragmatism. A headline from one major Chinese outlet declared, "Canada returns to rational diplomacy." For Trump, who has built much of his foreign policy on isolating China and rallying allies to do the same, Carney's move is nothing short of an act of defiance. Sources close to Trump's re-election team say the president sees this as a personal betrayal, especially coming at a time when the White House is struggling to maintain its tariff strategy. One insider put it bluntly. Trump thinks Carney is giving China an escape hatch. If Canada begins increasing exports to China, particularly in electric vehicles and agricultural products, it could blunt the effect of Trump's tariffs, and hand Beijing a powerful lifeline. And here's where the story takes an even more intriguing turn. Unverified reports claim that during the meeting, she suggested a new, Northern Corridor trade route, a logistics plan linking Canadian ports to Chinese markets through Arctic shipping lanes. The idea, while still speculative, could drastically reshape global trade routes, and sideline American ports in the process. If even part of that plan moves forward, Canada could become one of China's most strategic partners in the Western Hemisphere. So, what happens next? Carney has accepted Xi's invitation for a future state visit to China, though no date has been set. Behind the scenes, officials from both countries are said to be drafting agreements that could redefine their economic cooperation. In Washington, meanwhile, tensions are escalating. Trump has privately warned allies that he will not tolerate a Canadian pivot to China. Rumors are swirling that the U.S. is considering a temporary freeze on bilateral trade talks, until Carney clarifies his position. But in Ottawa, the message from Carney's office is clear: Canada will make decisions based on its own national interest, not Washington's approval. For many Canadians, this is a long overdue assertion of independence. For Trump, it's a nightmare come true. As one U.S. diplomat put it bluntly, Carney isn't aligning with China to provoke Trump. He's doing it because Canada's tired of being America's sidekick. Still, the risks are enormous. If the U.S. retaliates, Canada's exports could take a hit, and cross-border tensions could flare. But Carney seems ready to gamble, betting that China's vast market and new trade opportunities will outweigh the costs. The world is watching. And somewhere in Washington, Donald Trump is watching too, angry, suspicious, and determined to make sure this so-called turning point doesn't become a full-blown alliance. The stakes? Canada's economic future, China's global reach, and Trump's fragile control over the Western alliance. This is more than diplomacy. This is a battle for influence, and Carney may have just fired the first shot.